right, it is 8:32, and welcome to week number 3 already. It seemed like we just started this, didn't it? But it's already the halfway point. After next week, it will be the halfway point. After this week, will be the halfway point. But yeah, we're getting along here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I do want to say that most of you saw my my grading for your preamble, and my comment to almost everybody that you missed was the part about explaining why you wrote what you wrote. So people lost about 3 points for that. That's not a lot, but people did lose. It was not, everything's not in the rubric, but if you look at the module, let's look at the module itself, because I always tell students, make sure add anything you believe is missing, make contemporary and relevant, make sure it speaks to all possible times, as the framer did when they wrote. I thought it was in here. I know I mentioned it. Do you remember me mentioning it during the lecture? I think I mentioned it during the lecture. You remember me mentioning it? I think I did. I try to do it every time I do it. Do you remember? Yeah, I think I did. But one of the things that's important about this assignment is that it's the easiest assignment to do, and it is always good to add information. Why? Yeah, I do stress the importance of the rubric, but I also you got to remember something about the rubric. The rubric is the general outline where 90%, 95% of your grade comes from. But also, I concentrate on things that this course, when they put it together, some of the things that they should do. They should not just throw something out here like just rewrite the Constitution, add anything you believe is missing to make it more contemporary and relevant to our present day society. Make sure it speaks to all possible future times, as the framers did when they wrote our current. But one of the things that's always important, and I guess this comes from me being a lawyer, is you don't just make a statement, but you explain why you tendered that statement. That's, I guess that's you're going to be a lawyer one day, so you'll understand what I'm saying. You know, it's kind of like I still got in me the judges that said to me over and over, okay, Wright, that's a good argument. Could you elaborate on why you're making this argument? And so it happened a million times. And one day you'll come back to me and you'll say, yeah. You'll come back to me one day and you'll say, you know what? You were right. I should always explain why I adopt a certain position. One of the things about law, and I'm going to move on after that, this is that they taught us this in law school. They said you must not only understand how to interpret the law, but you also must be able to elaborate and understand the history of the law and from your perspective. So I guess that's where all of that comes from. So, you know, so anyway, that's what that's all about. So you guys, I thought I said it, and I try to remember to say stuff like that. But so anyway, that's what happened. Remember, when I do talk about the rubrics provide, but also the module itself should elaborate a little more, and I try to, they don't want me to rewrite the rubrics. So I would, if I could rewrite the rubrics, I'd write them totally different. They'd be more detailed, but they don't want that because they want the grade to be as objective as possible based on some general principles, you know, to get the points. And like, for example, I tell you this, that you have to have a cover page. That's not, I mean, that's kind of in the rubric. If you look at the rubric, but because it talks about APA. So if you notice in here, they don't say anything about APA, but the rubric that they gave me to put together, going back to it, it talks about grammar, APA, and organization. So, you know, anyway, I didn't take away like a bunch of points away. I just took away 3 points away. So, okay. So anyway, we're on week 3. And let's look at the assignments for this week. First of all, the project, relevant case law. Now, remember last week that you guys were supposed to pick a topic that you intend on writing your Fourth Amendment project on, an area that pertained to the Fourth Amendment. And you guys did pretty good with that. And so now I want you to prepare a relevant case and a secondary sources, which I had students in the last class to say to me, they thought secondary sources were lower courts. I says, no, those are primary sources, but that's case law. But articles, academic journals, so forth, so and all that, you're expert at finding that stuff because you gave me that information that you guys use as paralegals. So the key thing is there are plenty of journals and articles on the Fourth Amendment and the area that you guys picked out. So, you know, you don't have to give me a lot of them. 2 is good, you know, 3 if you want to keep going, I don't care. But and then brief the cases that you decide to use for the relevant case or or case law. Brief the cases, and you know how to do that because that was one of your assignments that you had to do for week 2. So submit the one is the minimum. One is the minimum. A relevant for the relevant case, 1 is the minimum. But I like to see 2. But you know, you won't lose points if you just give me 1. Submit the brief. It says briefs. So if you have more than 1 case, according proper briefs, write a synopsis about a paragraph long on at least 3. See, this is where you come into the numbers. 3 secondary sources. I'm sure you did. So you got a head start on some of these students. So you could be a teacher assistant in this class, actually. And then, of course, you know about proofreading and so forth. So going back and looking at the course home, let's go back and let's look at, before we get to that, the course project for week 3. And it tells you include case briefs, and that's, like I said again, you only have to have 1, but a synopsis, but you must have 3 secondary sources, which you're prepared on that, and then it's APA from there. So it's pretty consistent here in terms of the information, just as it was last week. It was pretty consistent there. All right. So that's the rubric for that. While I'm here, let's look at the rubric for this one. Freedom of the press and the right to a fair trial. So what you're going to do is you're going to describe if you believe the press has any effect on the jury pool and a fair trial. I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. So I'll be filling in some information for you for that. Explain your position using the First Amendment as support. And see, in this instance, they did what I talked about earlier. They said, make sure you explain your position. And that was kind of like what they should have done back here as well. So I tried once to work on developing a course, and they go through so many hoops. I says, I couldn't do it. Well, I had some other issues that stopped me from doing it at the time. But sometimes some of these people put the courses together. When we get them to teach them, I have to go back to them and say, hey, how about adding this or that language? So anyway, you got that for week 3. So you got both assignments. Freedom, and notice this. See, it tells you how many pages in here. This, you don't have to worry about that. Just provide the information. And you know, the reason why we have page requirements and have to say them in some instances is, if you notice that week 1 we didn't have to do that, is that we believe that it takes the minimum of 1 page to answer these 2 questions. Do you believe that the press can have an effect on a jury pool or resulting in denying defendant to a fair trial? If so, how? If not, why? And then grammatical. And then you should also be able to include in that, not only that, you have the First Amendment for the media, the press. Which amendment do you have for the fair trial? Do you know which amendment that's found in? The same one is right to counsel. Yep. Same one is right to counsel, and that's for the 6th, and that's it correctly. So I don't believe you can write a paper without mentioning the 6th Amendment and what the 6th Amendment says about the right to a speedy and fair trial. The key thing there. So the question is, does the pretrial publicity or the media's role prejudice the defendant's right to a fair trial? And again, I'm going to talk about that in just a few minutes. Okay, you're all good on these assignments? Okay, I got you. Okay, so the discussion, notice this week, you have only 1 discussion post. You have, of course, initial post that's due tomorrow night, and then you have a reply post that's due Saturday night. But it's on gun control, the hot topic. It is a hot topic. The Second Amendment should be mentioned in that argument. You know, here's where I always say, I read your papers to see how analytical you are. If you're going to talk about gun control, is it possible to really respond to an issue of gun control without discussing the Second Amendment? Is that possible to do adequately a job without doing that? Do you think that would make it inadequate? Yes, it definitely would. But sometimes students tend to say, okay, well, we didn't have to say that. We're just going to debate the issue of gun control. Okay, lay a foundation out. You know, guys, and I'm not really speaking to you directly, but guys in general, I always say, look, let's put this out so that someone can pick it up that don't know anything at all about what you're doing and be able to then pick it up from there. And that's the job of the person who's doing the assignment. And so it's very important. If you pay attention to journalists and reporters, when they're reporting on an issue, they will provide something of the legal support or some kind of statute or some kind of procedure that's involved to, put something out there. Don't just throw out there and start talking about I'm against guns or I love guns because, and so forth and so on. So, and if you never mention, if anybody writes discussion posts and I don't see mention of the Second Amendment, then you're going to lose points. And I think you rightfully should, because that means you would inadequately present your foundation and even initiate a debate. So what's the debate all about? Interpretation of the Second Amendment. That's really what it's about, and other things too, that such as like yours truly, I am anti-gun. I owned a gun, but the only time I owned a gun is when I was a police officer. When I wasn't, I didn't. Another reason why is because I had an experience in my family where my adopted mother, and I've been so busy, I haven't had a chance to. I'm going to make a concerted effort to put together this story about myself. And the point of the matter is that guns have done some pretty bad things to people, as you know, dealing with schools, dealing with the military bases. My cousin was down at Fort Hood when the psychiatrist went off and started shooting. He was on his way in that direction and hid behind a tree. Called his mom while shooting was still going on. Shooting wasn't at him, but those kinds of things, dealing with the school, Sandy Hook, Columbine, going back to that, going back to what happened in Vegas, and those kinds of situations where this guy, Dylan Roof, went into an African American church in, I want to say, South Carolina. Charleston. Is that South Carolina or North Carolina? But in one of those Carolinas, and South, and kill those people. That's ridiculous. In the Tree of Life Synagogue, in near Pittsburgh, you remember that one as well, where the person came in and shot and killed these people doing worship service. So, I mean, it's and then not to mention the fact that as a lawyer, I represented gangs, and I used to tell them, I ain't care about y'all shooting at each other. Y'all just don't know how to aim, and you miss and hit innocent people. I was looking at Michelle Obama's chronicle that they did on CNN, and I was reminded about Hidea Pendleton. You know that name, Hidea Pendleton? Well, Hidea Pendleton was a young African-American, smart kid, straight A student who took part in the inauguration in Washington, D.C. when President Obama was installed as president on the 20th of January in 2009. And a few weeks later, she's back home, and she's an innocent victim of a gun shooting. She was shot and killed, and it enraged Michelle Obama. And one of the reasons why it enraged Michelle Obama is because the young girl was killed in an area where she was raised. You know, Michelle Obama is from Chicago, south side of Chicago, what's considered the South Shore. And it brought tears to my eyes as well. So this was an incident that involved guns as well, but there's many, many, many more. So anyway, this week you also have a quiz, which is why you have, Hidea Pendleton. Yeah, she's buried the same cemetery where one of my grandbabies who passed away. She was born with a enlarged kidney and lived a few hours, and yeah, so she's buried there also, not too far from even where her grave is. But anyway, so we have some, I'm gets kind of emotional about that kind of stuff. So, but anyway, back to the point here. You have a quiz this week, and your quiz is like kind of a midterm, 15 multiple choice and true false questions based on the materials that you've covered during weeks 1 through 3. And of course, you have to abide by the academic misconduct policy. I can tell you there's a final exam coming up, and I had some students that got dinged on it last term, T1 in constitutional law, because they provided answers, because you had some, in this instance you don't, but back then, for the final exam, you had to fill in information. You had to answer some questions and provide information. Well, it was quite clear that they had copied and pasted or taken information that they didn't remember themselves or had notes or something, which is improper. And they lost points because of that. And technically I could have reported them, but I did not. I just took the points away from a very good answer because it was a violation of academic misconduct policy. You recall in the academic integrity video that when you take these exams, that you're supposed to abide by the academic misconduct policy. And then Dean Mladic, who I know you know Dean Mladic, don't you, Rebecca? Yes, yeah, classy guy. He was my dean at Romeoville before. I don't know if I've ever said. Yeah, I know he's your boss's boss. Yep. And so the point of the matter is that Dean Mladic's video that he did that I shared during week 1 is a reminder that you don't use sources unless you clear them with me. And most students don't bother to do that because they know they're not supposed to do it anyway. So anyway, it's closed book. That's my whole point in a nutshell. And so anyway, so that quiz will take place. And then, of course, your key phrase that I give you for the week. Those are the assignments for the week. They are due Saturday. I'm sorry, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard for the reply post. And then your written assignment is due Sunday, which you're going to see in a minute when we look at the calendar. Speaking of that, some of you may or may not know that this doesn't apply to discussion posts, but this applies to written assignments for week 2. If your assignments were not turned in yesterday for week 2, but they're turned in by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard tonight, they're on time, because some of you don't, who got your assignments done earlier didn't know this. And I didn't know it because a former student of mine reached out to me and asked me a question in another class. And she said, is the system down? And I said, no, I just finished doing some grading. Well, in fact, it did go down right after I finished my grading, and it was down. So they sent us a email today. I don't know if they sent you guys an email, but I know we got an email saying to please extend the courtesy of not taking points away from week 2 written assignments until tonight at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard to compensate for that. So anyway, that's an aside I thought I'd mention. So now let's go back to the course homepage. Yeah, I know you did. I know you did. I think I graded it. Did I grade it already? Oh, not yet? Okay. All right. Oh, I know what I did. I did the discussion post. That's what I did. Yeah. No, it's not a secret. So anyway, back down here is the live classroom lecture schedule again. We are in week 3. We have 3 more to go, and the quarter will be over. And the recording will be here later tonight or early in the morning, one or the other. Let's take a look at the calendar. Course calendar before I go to and here we go. It shows where we are. Today is the 23rd. Your reading assignment, lab lecture. Click on that and it opens it up. You got the PowerPoints from week 5 and 6 because I sent those yesterday. And then your initial post on gun control, your reply post Saturday, and then your written assignments that we talked about, the 4th Amendment written assignment and the midterm, and then your key phrase. Okay. All righty. Again, reminding you that the course ends on the 18th of December. That is final. It does not end the 20th or the 19th. If your assignment comes in and it says 12 o'clock, which means it's on the 19th, you're going to get a 0. I had a student that did that this last time, and she debated with me about it. And I told her, I said, I'm sorry, the course is over. It's just like trying to tell the IRS that you filed your taxes and the postmark was the 16th when it was due the 15th. And they say, well, there was a problem with the mails. No, they don't, no. The rule is the rule and the deadline is the deadline. So, you know, it's kind of like telling the governor, that the stay of execution before midnight and that the governor says, doggone it, I got there at 12:01. Well, chances are that person is dead by that time or is fairly on their way to execution. So you know what I mean. Deadlines. We got there are people that always try to figure out ways to get around deadlines. I said, live with it, operate by it. It's very important. Okay. So that's the deadline there for this course. All right, let's go back into course homepage so we can look at what you already know, but I will make sure you see it in the announcement. Protecting basic freedoms, 5 and 6 of the text. First Amendment and gun control. You know what your discussion post is about. Do again tomorrow night, 11:59 p.m., Saturday, 11:59 p.m., Central Standard Time. And always say Central Standard Time because there are people who are in other time zones. Except if you're on the East Coast, you should not ever be late for 11:59 p.m. Central Standard because that's 12:59 your time. So that's the way it is because they're an hour ahead of us. If you're to the west of us, that's where you have a problem. But I don't really have students that have that issue. So we already talked about these 2 assignments, freedom of the press and the fair trial, and the 4th Amendment relevant case law and then of course the midterm exam. And then, yeah, pay attention to the rubrics, but also pay attention to the things I've added into it. Please complete the mid-quarter student survey. It's kind of funny having surveys done in this class. I could almost figure out whose survey is who without names. Oh God, that's too funny. I had a class one time where I had something similar to this, and I got one survey back, and so I saw it. It was a very nice survey, and then the final was the one I really looked at, and I reached out to one of my former students. I said, that was a nice survey you wrote. She says, what do you mean? It was anonymous. I said, only one was submitted. Let's see, what did you say here? It said, note to self, be overly nice and wait until all papers. That's funny. That is too funny. Yeah. Yeah, I try to get all papers graded on time as much as possible. There is no excuse in this class why I can't get them done before Friday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. And to be honest with you, I actually have to delay grading them faster because I'm supposed to check in your classes at least 5 out of the 7 days. And I can't go 2 days in a row without checking in. And so if I do everything the first or second day, then I won't have anything to come back to. And I have to put a grade in there or something in there, or else they won't. Yeah, I'll be bored. But my dean will say, oh, you didn't check into class. I says, I have 4 kids in class, 4 students in class. I did all their grading already. So anyways, that's not acceptable. But anyway, at the end of this, there is my strong and finish. The school uses this now. And then adversity is the springboard to success. I, again, will give you that information. Hopefully, I'm going to try to work on it this week. I keep saying that, but it's not this class that keeps me extremely busy. It's the other classes. Yeah, so I got one where I got a whole bunch of students in. So, all right, because I teach drugs and crime, and I teach introduction to criminal law as well. All right, so now let's get into week 3's module. And let's talk about these things. Some of these things I've already kind of covered. First Amendment and gun control. So I've kind of covered gun control, but just gonna, for the moment here, we'll talk about, I'll talk about that. Yeah, I already did the Second Amendment. There it is right there. Made my point earlier. And then it talks about all the things that I kind of talked about. I didn't mention Gabrielle Giffords. Gabrielle Giffords, by the way, Arizona representative. Did you not know that her husband won as the Senate candidate in Arizona? Giffords is her maiden name, and her husband's name is, I can't think of his name, but anyway, he was an astronaut. But he is now one of the senators in Arizona. But anyway, Gabrielle Giffords nearly lost her life. See, that's what I'm talking about. Look, shootings taking place. I was reminded again in that chronicle that Michelle Obama, they had that, they were doing first ladies in the White House on CNN, and they did Hillary Clinton, they did Jackie Kennedy, they did Eleanor Roosevelt, they did Lady Bird Johnson, and they did Clinton. They did her as well. and I think that was it. But anyway, in Michelle's um, chronicle, they reminded me of something that happened. I remember is that someone shot with an AK. I think it was 47. It was one of those high-powered weapons. A bullet through the window of the White House in the area where they lived, and that's scary, But I'm talking about that to say that Gabrielle Giffords, a representative who was shot. You probably remember John Hinckley. You know who John Hinckley is? You know that name? Yeah. John Hinckley uh, shot at President Reagan, shot at President Reagan and his Secret Service agent, Terrence. I think his name was Terrence. I know his last name is McCarthy. By the way, since you're from the area here, did you not know he just retired as the chief of police of Orland Park, the police department? He was the chief of police there for many, many, many years. Yeah, yeah, yep. He just retired. I met him several times. Real cool guy. And then also that was the same incident that the press secretary who subsequently died, but he became disabled, was Brady, and that's where the Brady law came in, dealing with background checks and stuff like that. So you got all these individuals, Travion Martin, and the list goes on and on and on. So anyway, so the question about bearing arms and how important it is, putting the guns in the hands of the wrong people, putting the guns in the hands of some people who are authorized to have the weapons, but they abuse their power and authority. And so want to consider, as we said here, both sides of this debate, and that's what you're going to deal with in your discussion post, and why people, the argument is that the right to bear arms is an ability to protect themselves. I was raised in Chicago as a kid up until 12 years old in a very bad area, and uh, guns were fired, but not like now. But the point of the matter is that um, I didn't, I've never had a problem. I don't have a gun right, excuse me, I don't have a gun right now. And that gun that some people use, it is dangerous, even in the house where I know of people whose family members lost their lives because there was a gun present where kids got those guns. So there's all kinds of debates about it. As Illini, Illinois has a firearms FOID card required if you're going to get a gun. And then we also now have carry conceal. We were the last state in the country to have that. And one of my classmates, Lee Hugh Goodman, who graduated with me, fought against that for the longest. And he's a champion still for dealing with gun control. And then on the other hand, you have Florida. There is no FOID card or any other type of permit where the person has a concealed weapon. You wonder if that was the state where was it Orlando, I believe it was, at that nightclub where that mass shooting took place. You remember that one, that massacre? You remember that one? Yeah. So I'm saying all of this to simply say is that there's some real serious problems here, and that gun control is important. And there's people that will come to me and say, well, guns don't kill people. It's people with guns who kill people. I said, yeah, that's like knives don't kill people. People with knives kill people. Cars don't run over people. People who drive cars run over people. So get out of here with that argument. I don't even want it doesn't, as Vinny said, and my cousin Vinny, that argument doesn't hold water. Or no, as judge, the judge said to Vinny, that argument doesn't hold water. And, you know, the point of that is that's not acceptable. But anyway, I taught this course in 11 weeks at one time, and the 1 week was the whole issue of guns. And man, what a lecture that I had. I mean, it was the entire lecture was all about the Second Amendment and my position, feeling, what I think about that. I'm not going to tell you about it now, but you'll see it in the discussion post that I respond to, and my comments about it. What I believe really the intention of the Second Amendment was in the first place. So anyway, that's it about guns. So now let's go back and pick up with the issue of the First Amendment. And again, as we know that it covers several areas: religion, the free exercise, and then we're dealing with the section that deals with abridging the freedom of speech. So the press has a responsibility to be able to report what is going on, so that the citizenry is knowledgeable about what is going on in their communities. And so the First Amendment, as some people have said, is really more for demonstrations and civil stuff. But that's not true, because as we bring to your attention the fact that the First Amendment does clash with the Sixth Amendment of the right to a fair and speedy trial for individuals. And so the question comes up about what happens with the media reporting the story. Can a person get a fair trial? There is a case that was made into a TV series, and it was called, involved a doctor by the name of Sam Shepard, and I believe it was from out of Ohio. Yeah, it was. I'm trying to look at it while I'm talking to you. Anyway, it was such a circus atmosphere that yeah, here we go. He was a neurosurgeon, and he was charged with murdering his wife. But he was first convicted, and it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Yeah, it was in Ohio where it happened. And what happened is that it was a media circus that took place. And in the famous case of, and they did a movie about that, the Sam Shepard case, but the United States Supreme Court ruled in, what was it? I'm trying to find the case number. Supreme Court. Anyway, the Supreme Court ruled that his conviction was overturned. And let's see, Shepard with 2 P's. Oh, that's not it. But anyway, it's Shepard versus, I think it's versus Arizona, or Shepard versus U.S. Give me a minute here, because I want to give it to you. SHEPPARD versus, was it Maxwell? Yeah. Yeah, Shepard versus Maxwell. 384 U.S. 333, 1966, where it dealt with the freedom of press. It's a very interesting case, and it was a case that was clearly overreaching because of the circus that took place. And it dealt with the whole issue of the First Amendment and the Sixth Amendment. So you can check it out. The majority, Justice Clark, Justice Douglas, Justice Warren, Justice Harlan, Brennan, Stewart, White, and Fortas. Justice Black was the one justice that dissented in that case there. Very interesting case. If you ever take the time to read it, it's kind of long, but 384 U.S. 333. But it's the classic example of what can happen in the First Amendment where they overreach in terms of the media. So anyway, here we come back to a determination about the First Amendment, and the First Amendment says you have free speech, and it doesn't exactly give free speech because you can't just say anything. For example, it's a famous Supreme Court case that I think it was N. Ray Shank. Once again, let's see, I think it was N. Ray, S-C-H-N-E-C-K. N. Ray Shank. Yeah, N. Ray Shank. It was a case that said that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater because I think that was it, Shank. I'm looking at Shank. But the point of the matter is that it's you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, and why not? Because you can create a stampede, fire in a crowded I want to get this theater. Yeah, case. Okay, here we go. Oliver Wendell Douglas, the Supreme Court. Yeah, it was Shank. I was right. I thought so. I know my mind kind of gets out there sometimes. But yeah, it was the U.S. Shank versus the U.S. And a famous line that came out saying that you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. There's been articles written in law journals all about that and so forth and so on. But the basic origin of that is that you can't do things that create dangerous situations just because you have, quote, First Amendment rights to free speech. So I guess I should put it this way, is that I have people all the time say, oh, I have a right to say this. I said, well, if it endangers somebody's life or you put somebody in a dangerous situation, you might not be right about that. So based on the Shank case and the application of that theory to other instances as well. And it goes along with, as you may or may not know, that people saying things to incite people in riots to fight, that fighting words, so to speak, operate on the same basis because it creates a dangerous situation. So the First Amendment is not a absolute, and it is, it says, prohibiting the free exercise or abridging the freedom of speech. So those cases that I mentioned would not be considered as violations of free speech, because then we balance we have a balancing test, and we have that's one of the theories for interpreting cases to determine if it is better to protect the public and let the individual have less to say, where it is better to protect the public and censor that person a bit. And it makes sense for orderly society. So those kinds of things. So thus we come to the infamous Miller versus California case. We call that the nasty case. That's what we called it in law school. And where it talks about what is obscene. And the United States Supreme Court, in a decision, basically set the standards for what is considered as obscene. And it's most interesting what has happened after that. And it's a step test. So basically, part A is whether the average person, they have the quote average person or reasonable person applying contemporary community standards, the standards would be acceptable and generally in a community, would find that the work taken as a whole appeals to prurient interest. In other words, it's there just to incite you or entice you or to appeal to your sexual nature, as opposed to B, whether the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct defined by the applicable state law. And then C, if the work taken as a whole, though, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, then it's obscene. So there are things that you, just because you see that are considered as offensive to you, doesn't necessarily make it obscene. However, states are able to use this, the Miller test, as we call it, to determine whether or not. For example, one of the examples that we had in the 11-week course regarding this issue is and this was one of the, I think, discussion posts where somebody, I forgot the name of the character they used, had a roller rink, and in the roller rink, he played certain kind of music, and playing that kind of music resulting in fighting. And there was fighting that took place. Well, the Supreme Court, they used that to try to use the Miller test. And actually, the whole issue was there was some artistic value in that. Therefore, the person could play the music that they wanted to. Now, as far as they had a minor ban, as you know, or we'll learn here in a minute, that minors are protected because, you know, we don't want child pornography. And so it's not subject to the Miller test. And so children are protected from this whole test. So finally, in the case of New York versus Ferber, the court said that states can have more rigorous regulation when it comes to children, because than the obscenity test from Miller versus California. And the key thing is there's a lot of latitude given. In that case, it's 458 U.S. 747, 1982 case. And the key thing is to protect our children from being exploited in those kind of situations. And so it is determined that it is a balancing test again, that it is better to protect the children than allow people to utilize those things. As you hear constantly now of people who are teachers or placed in situations where they work with young children and some older children, where they will utilize them in pornographic videos and pictures and things of that nature. So First Amendment is not going to protect that kind of activity. That's basically, in a nutshell, what it is. Other than that, the key thing is what I talked about before, and that's the importance of protecting the Sixth Amendment right of the individuals. And like I said, I do invite you to look at that Shepard versus Maxwell case. That is a very interesting, where the clash is boom. And man, if the movie that they did actually demonstrated how egregious that the media was. I mean, it was woo. And he was, and the conviction was overturned. So, all right. Well, I've about run my course, and I want to know if you have any questions about anything that I talked about regarding the First Amendment or gun control or anything else. Yes, I would expect that in this situation. So, keeping that in mind, the phrase to get your points tonight. Oh, okay. So you're submitting a thesis. So you're doing a article, huh? I had a student, a dissertation. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to reading it. My inclination for my key phrase tonight is gun control. That's it. So I'll use that one because that's a topic that I think looking at the assignments for this week, even though I would have loved to have seen that as a written assignment as opposed to just a discussion post. And Rebecca, you're just making it that anyway with your discussion. So you're gonna blow your classmates out of the water. So anyway, I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm sure. Elaborate as to why you are in that post. Be sure, because I'm always interested in why. Like I said, I explain why I am the way I am about it as well. Cool. I'm looking forward to that one. So I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving and eat as much turkey as you can. In my house, it's going to be one dog and 4 people: my wife, myself, and 5 people, and 3 of my kids. That's it. I have a daughter that my other daughters, they have their own families, but I have a daughter who doesn't live with us right now, and she wants to do her own thing. I told her she'd get a plate to go. That's it. We're not having anybody at our house that doesn't live here for this, because I'm really seriously listening to what these people the doctors are saying. Yeah, a grab. Yeah, a grab and go, right? Yeah, I know what she's going to say. She's going to say, but I bought some of the food. That's all right. You'll get some of the food to take with you too. And so, yeah. But I warned her. She didn't want to. She wanted to be an adult, and now she's living the adult life and complaining about it. Okay, so that's what happens when Yeah. So, so having kids will help you know to look at the realities of what's going on. Do you have kids? Oh, you have three. Okay. All right. How old are your kids? Oh, okay. So you're early in the game. Yeah, man, I remember when my youngest one is 12, my oldest is 49, and so six girls, two boys. But I remember going through all those steps, dealing with every one of them. You know.